Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Nuked Radio with Radchick, and my co-host today is Jules. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I think the sun flares are messing with things today. Jules and I aren't feeling well, like low blood sugar or something. I don't know. There's some earthquakes going on in Japan. Probably some of you saw this morning. USGS is reporting within the last few hours a 6.9, 6.1, 5.7, a 5.4, a 5.7, and a 4.9. And Geoscience Australia actually has the biggest one pinned at 7.4. And I saw an interesting post on another forum this morning from someone in Japan. It says, I live 1 mile from the coast in Aomori Prefecture. The earthquake felt eerily familiar to last year's big one. But the crazy part is that there were helicopters flying over my house towards the ocean as the earthquake struck, as if they knew it was coming. So I tagged that post to see what this guy says later. Anytime that we have any kind of large-scale earthquake activity on one side of the Pacific Plate, then you always worry about what might happen, how it may affect the other side of the plate. So anyone in Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, Baja, should just make sure that they're prepared and that they have some water and food to last a few days in case something happens, in case the power goes out. So there was a tsunami alert issued for the northeast coast of Japan, a 0.5 meter in height. Jules had told me that one did hit, but it was small. If anyone in chat could maybe keep one of the earthquake windows open and just keep an eye on it and alert us if anything else happens while we're on air today. And we were going to have Jim Walsh on, but he called me right before we went on air and said that he's just too busy today. He's got a lot of meetings, and he's getting ready to go out of town on Saturday to the Mideast to a big nuclear summit. So I'm going to try to tape a show with him tonight, and we're going to play that either later on this week or next week. So what we want to talk about today is mitigation. And yesterday we were talking about some of the reports of contamination that the USGS had posted in the last few weeks. And a friend of mine called me who lives in New Jersey. She had heard the show and wanted to share that her Shih Tzu, which is a small dog, very low to the ground. He's 3 years old, and he was just diagnosed with Gastro Enteritis. And it was quite severe. In fact, the normal medications that the vet would prescribe for it didn't work, and she actually had to keep him like inpatient at the vet clinic for a few days. And a common ailment that was found in the Chernobyl liquidators and in people around Fukushima right now is gastroenteritis. And what it is an inflammation of the lining of the stomach and the small intestine. The cells in that part of your body regenerate a lot, and radiation affects the cells that are dividing. So that's one of the first places that things will show up. But what was so interesting was that she told me the vet had said that they're seeing an outbreak in this right now in sniffer dogs. And those are dogs that keep their nose to the ground. So I told her to mention to the vet if he thinks it could be from fallout or contamination. First thing that we want to hit, and this is mitigation A through Z today. The number one thing, of course, is air. That includes air in your house, the air in your car, and the air outside. Now for your house, what I have seen recommended is a HEPA filtration set, especially maybe in the kids' bedrooms. It's like a stand-up unit that you turn on, and it filters all the air in the room. And then any dust or particles in the air actually get attached to an aluminum sheet that's inside the machine, and then you take out the sheet to clean it. It's like the filter. It uses a static electric charge to grab the dust, and if you have a Geiger counter, you should test it. And if you want to see this being done, there's a gentleman that I had mentioned yesterday on YouTube named Enviro Reporter, Michael Collins. He's an award-winning author. He has a great website. Check it out. But watch some of his videos where he tests his HEPA filters from inside his house in Santa Monica. And the last test that he did was the highest one that he's had yet since Fukushima. Do you have one of those, Jules?
I do, and actually we pulled the filter out about a month ago and ran my Geiger counter over it, and everything was normal, so I was happy about that.
Good.
But I have not had windows open upstairs since the accident happened, so I'm sure that's why.
Well, the other thing is, too, I don't have any of those units yet, too. I'm going to be looking into getting one for my kids' room. Activated carbon furnace filters. Now, I ran around to Home Depot and Lowe's, and they actually don't carry them in the store, but you can easily order these online. They're a little bit more expensive than your normal furnace filter. And if you run the vent in your house, you know, it's pulling in air through your furnace, too, so the air would get filtered through the activated carbon. You know, you could probably make your own, like, depending on the size of your furnace filter. If you were able to buy activated carbon in bulk, then, you know, you could use, like, a box cutter and slit the cotton fabric open and kind of sprinkle it all over and then like put it back together with a staple gun. And if anybody is crafty like that and wants to try it, you should have somebody film it and maybe upload a video to YouTube about it, because I haven't seen anyone do that, but it might be cheaper depending on the size of your furnace filter. You can buy them at PetSmart because people buy them who have, are worried about like animal or odors in their house. So you can get them in the store there. And when we come back, we'll talk about filtering the air in your car and what do you do when you go outside. You're listening to Nuked Radio with Rad Chick and Jules. We'll be right back. All right, next up, what do you do with the air in your car? What I had seen mentioned recently, which made sense to me, I'd never thought of before, is when you're driving in your car, especially if it's raining, you can run the air in the car on recirc. Hit the recirc button, and that way you're just recirculating that air instead of pulling in the outside air. And what would be nice to have is air filters from some cars around the country to test. We don't have a gamma spectrometer yet to do that with, but working on getting one. And in the meantime, there are a couple places on YouTube where you could contact people if the place that does your like oil change will let you have it. My daughter is sending me hers from Salt Lake City. I should be getting it any day, and I'm going to check it out with my Geiger counter. Use gloves if you're changing your own, just in case there's particles in it. And, of course, that's going to be much more important for people that live in the Pacific Northwest or on the West Coast if you're in a high-risk area. And the outside air. Obviously, avoid going out on high-risk days. Learn about the jet stream and precipitation, or keep track of the fallout forecast. And I do have a Twitter account now where I upload the forecasts, and we're also going to use that for emergency information. If something really crazy happens at Fukushima, if there's some type of explosion or the spent fuel pool falls, or there's another large tsunami warning, we would send something out on Twitter. And I would probably contact all the hosts on Orion that day, too, and just see if we could get on for a few minutes at some point during their shows and just let people know. Because if there is some type of explosion over there where another, heavily laden plume would be on its way here, the West Coast would have about 3 days before it would get here. And, there's smoke and steam and fog events that happen there occasionally. In fact, before we went on air, I dropped a link in for the TEPCO camera this morning after the earthquakes, and it looked like there was some steam or smoke coming out of from behind Reactor 1. You could it's actually the view from behind, like pointing towards the back of the reactors, and then the ocean is to the left. That's the TEPCO cam, and then the other one that you guys have probably seen is the JNN cam. That's the one up on the hill.
Christina?
It gives you a different view. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to mention is on FukushimaFacts.com, which is the site that Christina and I have put together with a lot of this information, we do have a link to Christina's Twitter account right on the main news page. I believe it's right above where I've been posting your fallout forecasts. Mm-hmm. And there also is a tab there specifically for the camera. So if people don't have the links to that, just hit FukushimaFacts.com and you should be able to find all that stuff there.
Yeah, and I think we have a link to the jet stream on there too. If not, you can just Google jet stream and it takes you right to CRWS. And you go to the forecast button, and then you can see the whole United States. There's one also for the North Atlantic and for the Pacific, for Alaska and Hawaii. So you can check your area on the days the forecast isn't running and just see if you have something outdoors planned and you want to know what's going on weather-wise. And I really think that everyone needs to keep an eye on that until we can get forecasters, local weather forecasters on board with this. I mean, if we did it from a local perspective, it could be, just so much more finely tuned and accurate. It's really hard to, cram the United States and Canada and Europe into 3 minutes.
You try. You do a good job.
It's really, really nice if the Weather Channel would start helping us out with that. And I've been on them. I post my forecasts on there all the time.
And John Connor's been helping us out, too, with his little photiums.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And anybody who's listening to, feel free to upload or put my stuff anywhere on Facebook, Twitter, any social media to spread it around. Consider getting a Geiger counter if you don't already have one, although you really don't need one. And if you don't have one, I just treat everything like it's radioactive and act appropriately. I mean, it's nice to see. It definitely confirms that the fallout is there. What's a little concerning to me is that sometimes the Geiger goes off and I actually get pretty high readings when there's nothing going on, when there's no precipitation and the jet stream isn't over me. And I don't know what to attribute to that, and I'm hoping to get an expert on in that field. I'm going to email her again today. But, they are expensive. Arnie Gunderson recommends the Inspector. Jules, what kind do you have?
I have the Medcom.
Okay.
I'm not sure which model it was, but it was at the time it was a $300 model. The last time I looked, they were like $499 now. But it connects right up to Radiation Network. So I actually have the Rochester, New York station is my house.
Yeah. The Inspector and the Medcom are the better ones. I have a Soaks, and I paid $176 on eBay. It came from Russia, and I didn't have one until December. I didn't have the money for it, so I saved up, and as soon as I got it, I ran it pretty much 24 hours a day, and all it did is really confirm what I had figured all the time, is there's definitely fallout that's happening. It seems that it comes in right before the rain starts is when it's the highest.
I've noticed the same exact thing. It's definitely goes up right before.
Yeah, it's like it's getting pushed out ahead of the system. So there are a few people on YouTube also that post readings from the St. Louis area, from British Columbia, and from Europe. And there's a few people from Europe on my page too. And then there's Radiation Watch on Facebook, which is a great page that I mentioned yesterday also. You can check those people out. And there's actually people from South America posting on there all the time, and they're getting readings too, which is a little surprising. So then, of course, the next question is whether you should be wearing a mask or not outside. And it's an individual decision depending on how much you're worried about it. I would say if you are a runner and you exercise outside and you're in one of those high-risk areas, I would definitely be wearing a mask. It really bothers me, too, like in the fall when I saw high school kids running out in the rain, no mask on, they're wearing shorts, they're wearing T-shirts. It's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, even in my neighborhood, I've been watching the kids since March, and the parents are doing absolutely nothing. You know, I've made certain that my daughter understands why we can't go in the rain or play in the snow right now or go in the pool, but most parents aren't paying any attention whatsoever.
Well, you know, and we don't know. The corium might fizzle out. I mean, we really don't know what it's going to do.
No, we don't.
It could keep doing what it's doing now, which is basically, you know, sinking into the ground under the plants and having this renewed criticality all the time. And then, you know, we see the smoke and steam events. A lot of times it's preceded by an earthquake. You know, it shakes up the ground. Each one of those corium blobs weigh 150 tons. And there's 3 of them, and they're 3,000 degrees. So, you know, it could, you know, theoretically break itself apart as it's fissioning underground and get less and less over time. So things may not be like this forever. We don't know, but right now, it's better to play it safe. We'll be back in a few with Nuked Radio. Jules just pointed out to me, Any News is reporting 10 quakes in Chiba during the last 90 minutes. Most recent is a 4.5. So definitely have to keep our eye on that today and our eye on the TEPCO cameras, especially reactor number 4. So we were talking about school kids and being outside. You know, I found out that the schools in Pennsylvania where the nuke plants are located actually have Geiger counters in the school that run all the time so they can determine whether or not the air is safe for kids to be outside. We really need this in every school in the country, especially on the West Coast.
It's surprising that they're doing that in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do if you get wet in the rain or if you think that you've been exposed? It's easy. You take a shower and you leave your clothes outside. When you bring them in to wash them, mix some baking soda in with them. I do that on every load now, just in case. I mean, baking soda is so cheap, but just keep like a Tupperware container of baking soda in your shower. Don't mix it in with your soap or your shampoo because it makes it watery. It actually like changes the consistency. Just keep an extra little bit handy and just sprinkle some in and wash up with that. Unless you have like a reverse osmosis system in your house, and we're going to talk about that next. Water. Filter it. Don't drink tap water. If you can afford it, you want to go high cost, get a system for your house. It's just like a hot water tank, but it's smaller than that if it's under your sink. This is what people in Japan are using. There's countertop versions that are about $100. The whole house system version is $200. Or if you want to go low cost, start buying your water from the grocery store. It's 39 cents a gallon by me. It's 22 cents a gallon in Florida. I've been doing this, but hauling water back and forth from the store is really a pain. I think it's probably worth the investment to get a system for your house. I mean, then your water is filtered when you take showers. It's filtered when, you know, you got to fill up pots to cook. The other thing, you can get a Brita Pitcher. And I'm not promoting Brita, but there's only like two or three brands available of these. They have an activated carbon filter, but it's important that you change the cartridges frequently. They recommend every 2 months, and that's how I've been changing mine, because once the particles, if there's any particles in the water, they attach themselves to the carbon. It negates that section of the carbon, so it doesn't work anymore. So that's why you need to change it frequently. I use that water when I fill up pots, so I'm not going through the gallon jugs. And then brushing teeth, too. We had mentioned yesterday baking soda toothpaste, and keep a bottle of filtered water next to your sink and use that to rinse out your mouth. Food, and this is kind of a big one. Stop eating fast food. Stop eating processed food. You're not getting any nutrition. Cook everything you can from scratch, and I know it's a pain, especially for people who are working or have kids. but it's something you get everybody in your family involved in too. Get used to using spices like turmeric, which has very strong anti-cancer properties and is also high in potassium, rosemary, cayenne, chevroil, coriander, parsley, basil, dill, tarragon, saffron, oregano, paprika, chili powder. There's a really good book, too, about eating lower on the food chain. It's by Michael Pollan, and it's called In Defense of Food. And this was written long before Fukushima. It's an excellent book, though, and it talks about how your body is just much more well-adjusted to eating plants than meat, and all the reasons why. Because what happens with biomagnification is when radiation gets into the food supply, it gets concentrated the higher it goes up. And animals are at the top of that list, and humans are at the top of that list. And I did a short video that's on YouTube called How Rads Get Into Food and Make You Sick. And there's some diagrams in there, and you might want to take a look at that because it's a little hard to conceptualize. It seems like if it goes into a bigger animal that it would get less, that it would get diluted. But that's not what happens. It has to do with the particles. So check that video out, and keep in mind, you don't have to stop eating meat, but if you eat it 4 or 5 times a week, try to just do it once a week. And of course, this includes animal products like milk and cheese. And there are certain types that are better for you. Fatty milk is going to be better than skim.
Hey, Christina, just to get back to the meat really quick, something that I stumbled upon not too long ago was, I think it's a grain or a seed. It's called quinoa, Quinoa. Mm-hmm. It's got a really high protein profile, amino acid profile. It is about as good as you can get and as close as you can get to something that would give you something comparable to meat. And it's grown in South America and Brazil. The Aztecs and the Mayans used to eat it. And it's very tasty. It's like a rice. But we've been putting that in with, vegetable mixtures, Brussels sprouts, carrots, whatever. And it's really delicious. And we're able to get a good dose of protein without having meat. So
that's the stuff that you actually made burgers out of it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I mixed it up with some breadcrumbs and eggs and cooked it in a little bit of olive oil and had it. It was delicious.
Yeah, chicken is better than beef. And animal products will get worse as time goes on, as if the fallout continues the way that it is. And there are things that could be done at the farming level to reduce that, like feeding boron to the cows. And, they've been doing that in Hawaii since May. Any News just posted that recently. I didn't know that. If they were doing it in Hawaii, we should have been doing it here because the jet stream hits here more.
Yeah, I did see that way back when, but they were only talking about that in Hawaii. I didn't see that on any type of national publication.
Yeah. I post this stuff on, there's a group on Facebook called Our Food Chain, and I've been getting the people in that group interested in this too, because, farmers need to be aware of this. That's one of the first things the Civil Defense Unit recommended in terms of fallout is you got to shelter the cows.
Yeah.
Because they graze on the grass and the fallout's on the grass.
Do you know my husband's uncle is a dairy farmer here locally? And the last time I saw him, I asked him about Fukushima and what he was doing with the cows, and he knew absolutely nothing about it, had never received any type of notification from the EPA or anything like that. So he was doing nothing with his cows.
Yeah. And we still eat eggs and cheese here because, well, for one thing, we love cheese, but because we're mitigating so many other ways, I don't worry about it. We haven't eaten meat in a long time, for years, actually. And other milk alternatives to try would be soy, almond, coconut, or rice milk. And I still buy cow's milk, and we use probably a gallon a week where we used to go through a gallon a day. So we've just, cut back. Produce. If you watch any of the films from the Civil Defense Unit, they recommend peeling your fruit in case fallout lands on it. But, the peels are a lot of times where all the vitamins are. And I think a better alternative is to just wash all your produce, your fruit, your spinach, your lettuce, your tomatoes, and mix a little baking soda. And I do that right when I come home from the grocery store. And that way I know everything in the fridge or anything that we have, you know, a bowl of fruit, my kids can just grab out of it. They don't have to worry about it. It's all clean. I've, you know, decontaminated it. Anything grown in the ground, especially potatoes, we definitely need to be washing those well. Eventually, I hope all the grocery stores are going to be testing food, and I ask every time I go in. And now I've got my neighbors asking too.
So now they avoid you like the plague.
Well, they started avoiding me. So, yeah, I started telling my neighbors, hey, when you go to Bush's, we tell them, you know, ask them if they're testing. That's all you have to do, and then walk away. Just get them thinking about it, because I've already been in there bugging them like crazy. Seafood, Pacific fish, I would say no. The first 2 months after Fukushima, there were 6 whales that washed up in Japan, China, and Russia, and they all were radioactive. And when you think about the food chain, the whale is a huge animal, and for them to be showing radioactivity that soon after the disaster, I thought was really surprising. But we'll be back in a we are back and continuing the seafood discussion. Of course, we already talked about the seal saga going on in the Pacific and what Jules mentioned yesterday, one in the Atlantic, too. So are fish safe from the Gulf of Mexico? I would say no to that also, because of the BP oil spill and all the core exit that was dumped in there. And just in the last month, there was a dolphin that washed up in Mississippi that had no eyes. They just didn't have any eyes at all. It's not normal. And shrimp without eyes, too. So there's definitely something going on in our oceans. And what are we going to do about gardening in the spring? And that's something that I've been working on with a few people. My biggest concern really is for people who are growing cannabis, for patients using it for medical reasons. And I really feel at this point, until we know exactly how to grow stuff and decontaminate the soil properly, that cannabis all needs to be grown indoors, where you control the soil or you control the water and the air, the filtration, especially if you're growing it for people who are sick or have cancer. I mean, you don't want to give them something that's going to make their cancer worse. So we need to figure out what to do with that. And I did see as a fallout recommendation if there had been some kind of bomb that went off, they recommend after the plume has subsided to put boron in a garden sprayer and spray everything outside, your house, your trees, your soil, and that would help neutralize any particles. I mean, that may be an effort that needs to be done across the whole country. We'll talk more to Jim about that, too, when I do his interview.
Yeah, One side note to that, Christina, what we did in the spring last year was we built a greenhouse outside with 2x4s and some of that thick, clear plastic.
Yeah.
And, because I had hit a vegetable garden every year, so we grew all of our vegetables in the greenhouse using filtered water and pre-Fukushima potting soil. And it worked out pretty well, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have the room for it, or you're handy and you can build something like that, I would highly recommend that. Or, indoors, even in a small apartment, you can grow vegetables with hydroponics or aquaponics, and there's all kinds of videos on YouTube about that. I would definitely consider washing anything that grew outside with boron at the end of the season, and, maybe packing stuff in with clay. But we will talk more about that as we get closer to planting season. Supplements, and Jules is more of an expert on this. In fact, I want to do a whole show. I'm going to try to get Kevin Allen from Master of Many Things on there. Check out his website. He has a list of every supplement you could possibly take. And I say just do what you can and do what you can afford. Don't go crazy with it. And you don't want to change a whole bunch of things at once. If you're going to start taking vitamins when you haven't before, start taking one and wait a week or two and make sure that, you're not allergic to it. It's not upsetting your stomach before you start something else. Because if you start taking a whole bunch of stuff and you have some kind of reaction, you're not going to know what caused it. Now, my family does, and we've gotten down to just the bare minimum, is high-dose vitamin C. Take 2,000 milligrams a day. What your body doesn't use just flushes right out of you. It boosts your immune system and has strong anti-cancer properties, and it's very cheap. Calcium and magnesium supplements, and that was something that was recommended by Chris Busby for kids in Japan. Calcium blocks the uptake of strontium to the bones, and magnesium blocks the uptake of cesium to the heart. And your body will actually prefer radionuclides over the real substance. So I felt that was important, even though his recommendation was just for Japan. And I talked to my doctor about it. You can actually get a supplement with both those things in it. And I have three people at home, and we take this every day, and $20 for a year's supply. So it's cheap too. And then we take a multivitamin, either a stress tab or one that's for cardiovascular health. So I'll see if I can get Kevin to come on a show. Jules, do you have anything you want to add to that? That you think is really important?
Not at this point. I mean, I would say some sort of spirulina, if you can find it, and make sure that it is not out of the Pacific. Trying to think of what else I was taking. I mean, I have a very large list of all the different supplements and the different things that they protect against that I am going to clean up a little bit, and I'll post. I think that would be better than trying to cram that in the last few minutes of the show.
All right, yeah, and Jules is going to post the mitigation list.
Yep, I did.
On Fukushima Facts. And something that I get asked about all the time is potassium iodide pills, which you are supposed to take in the event of a fallout situation, like from a nuclear bomb. And we probably should have all been taking those right after the reactors blew. But the government specifically sent out memos to all the doctors on the West Coast and said, don't put your patients on it. And I don't know why they did that. That was reported by Lauren Murray. What I tell people is that what makes the most sense to me is that you can't take this stuff endlessly. And you don't know when there's going to be iodine in the air. It tends to happen after criticality events. And we know that when we see that the reactors are steaming or there's smoke coming out of them. Usually there's iodine that's detected over here in the next few days. And sometimes we don't find it. It gets picked up in Europe. It takes 8 days before it decays to its first half-life. So they are still able to pick it up over there. So what I say is just start working foods into your diet that are high in potassium, because the potassium will block the iodine from being taken into your thyroid. And you can search a top 10 list on the internet, but a few that I like: avocados, the coconut milk, dates or nuts, especially pistachios. They also recommend fish and salmon, but we already said be careful with that. Dark chocolate is high in potassium, and seeds like pumpkin, squash, flax, and sunflowers. Also beans, especially white beans, adzuki beans, soy, lima, pinto, and kidney. So you just try to, make your kids eat one of those foods every day, and then you don't have to worry about it. I got a bottle of the tincture because you can't find potassium iodine pills anywhere. Pharmacies are all out of it. You can get them online in a few places, but we have the stuff that you just paint on your skin in case there was some kind of emergency.
That's what I have too, and that works pretty well.
Yeah. Do you leave your windows open or closed? I've had my windows open the last few days because of the warm weather. I vacuum a lot. I have a really good vacuum with a HEPA filter. You can test the dust afterward or send it to someone who can test it just to see what's in your air and your carpeting in your house. You want to pay special attention to the entranceway. You want to make sure everyone takes off their shoes before you come in the house so they're not tracking it through your house. Leave your coats at the door, or better yet, in the garage. And like I had mentioned before, mix some baking soda into the wash when you wash the kids' coats and stuff, just in case there's any particles. Or you can use a lint roller on them too if you're worried about it. The problem is continuous exposure, even at low levels, when it's hitting you 24/7, it's coming at you from air, food, and water. Anything you can do to eliminate as much as you can, wherever you can, I think is a good idea. And a lot of these things will improve your health in other ways. And things like having the HEPA machine filter your air in your house, and even like washing when you give your pets a bath, use baking soda on the pets. It won't hurt them, especially if your pets spend a lot of time outside. Watch them for hair loss. You could use a lint roller too if you're worried if they're losing a lot of hair, because what happens, especially if the animals lay on your kids' beds, is if they have something on their fur and then your kid lays down in the same place, then your kid could be picking it up. So you just want to make sure that those animals are clean as possible. I mean, a lot of what is going on with this fallout situation is outside of our control. But if you just use some common sense and incorporate just a few of these things, watch your family for the signs and symptoms that we talked about yesterday. If people in your house start getting nosebleeds or losing a lot of hair, maybe you need to step up your game a little bit. And if not, if everyone's feeling okay, maybe you can ease up, and you just kind of have to watch how you're feeling. So tomorrow, we're going to update the earthquake situation. For any of you who want to pay attention to that, I would highly recommend Dutch Sense on YouTube. He has been posting about the Japan earthquake and also radiation readings. And a couple other people to check out is, of course, Miss Milky the Clown. Although I think she's backing off on her uploads a little bit. She did post a video last night of her recent flight from Michigan to California, and she's using my Geiger counter, and the readings were extraordinarily high. So I dropped that in chat. If you get a chance, check it out. And we'll be back tomorrow. We'll hit up a few more mitigation things too and see what's going on with the news. And until then, stay safe.
Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my open mind, possessing and